It's time to turn a calabash bowl. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to turn a calabash bowl. What is a calabash bowl, you ask? Well, great question. A calabash bowl is simply a very basic vessel that is made from a gourd or a squash. And these have gone back thousands of years. Some people estimate the earliest calabash bowls or vessels were made over 8,000 years ago. The true calabash bowls predate the wood lathe. If you got to see my video all about the history of the wood lathe and how we are maintaining that history as wood turners, well then you know a little bit about the history of the wood lathe. Well, the calabash bowl was used long before the lathe existed. Essentially, if you think about it, people needed a way to carry seeds and food and things like that. So they used what was around them, and they would use these gourds, hollow them out and let them dry, and they made a shell, a very organic shape. Now, of course, what we're turning today on the lathe when we turn a calabash bowl is we're making a bowl style that is reminiscent of the organic shape of a gourd. So we're going to have a slightly closed rim and we're going to have a curved bottom that has no foot on it. That's really what makes a calabash bowl unique. This is just going to have a nice, smooth, organic curved shape to it, as if it were some squash or gourd that was growing naturally and was just harvested and hollowed out and left to dry. So that's the ultimate goal. We're not going to do anything really stylish with this other than giving it a nice fluid curved shape. So I'm going to get this great big blank mounted to the lathe. We're turning green sweet gum today, so we should be making lots of big shavings from this, and it should turn beautifully. And it's a great choice for making an organic looking calabash bowl.
So I'm going to measure the center of this blank. Now, again, this is a very large blank. This is about 14 inches across, and it's very heavy. So this is going to have a lot of mass when it's turning initially on the lathe. As I reduce this, it's going to become a lot lighter and it'll turn a lot faster. So I'm going to take my impact driver and drive wood screws into the faceplate. Faceplate is the best way to anchor a large, heavy blank like this. And I'll work my way around the faceplate on opposite sides and tighten up as many screws as possible. This plate has about 12 screws. I don't really need all 12. I'm probably going to put about 9 in here. Now, it's really important to hold this blank still. Do not try to spin the blank. Spin the headstock with the headstock handle like you saw there. If you try to turn just the blank, you're going to strip threads and you're going to have problems with your headstock down the road. Okay, so I'm going to rough this blank with my 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. This is my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. As I've mentioned to you guys in the past, you really do not need a ton of tools to turn bowls. In this case, I need a little bit heavier bowl gouge to rough out this blank initially. And between the 5/8 inch and the 1/2 inch bowl gouge, I'll be using a couple other tools for this particular bowl because it's large, but the 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge is great for roughing out bowls. You can see at the base of the bowl I was getting kicked around pretty good, and the way to alleviate that is to apply extra down pressure with your left hand onto the tool rest. Right there's a high spot on the bottom of this bowl that's wanting to kick the bowl gouge around. So what you want to do is you want to apply down force onto that tool rest so that the gouge isn't getting kicked around. Right here, I'm in a groove where I'm making a continuous cut, so there's no rough surface that's interrupting this cut. But I'm going to come back out to a rough area right here, and you can see it's kicking the bowl gouge around a little bit. Instead of trying to ride that rough edge and getting bounced around, focus on pushing down into the tool rest, and that's going to save a lot of issues. I've got a video all about how to not get beaten up by a bowl blank. You might want to check that out. Now this is sweet gum. This is some people call it a hardwood. I think it's a softwood, and it actually decomposes very quickly. So you got to be careful if you store this particular species. This was a log that's been stored for about a year, and it was a large log and basically cut off 2 end sections and then took a half section from an inner portion. So there's no punkiness or soft material in this, but there was a portion on another piece of this log that did have some punky areas that was rotting away. So you have to be careful with this particular species and get to it quickly. You don't want to let this one sit around for long, but you can see these nice long shavings coming off this as I'm turning. Typically when you have wet or green wood, you're going to get much longer shavings because the moisture in the wood is holding those fibers together and allowing that side grain portion to cut much longer and stay more intact than if the bowl or the blank were really dry. When wood is really dry, we're only going to cut small, short sections before they break off, and you won't get these really long, curly shavings like you're seeing here. Plus, wet wood just turns so much easier. It's relatively soft. It's being lubricated by the water, so the tool doesn't heat up quite as much. Tools stay sharper longer. Look at all those shavings. Okay, so I've got the bottom curve of the bowl blank roughed out. I'm going to straighten up this side so that the blank is a little more balanced. This way I can turn up the lathe speed as well. When the blank is unbalanced even a little bit, it's difficult to get the lathe speed up because those little imbalanced imperfections will create an oscillation or a vibration in the entire lathe. And if you get turning too fast, the lathe will vibrate and start walking across your floor, and obviously we don't want that. So the same concept that I was applying on the bottom of the bowl, I'm pressing firmly down into the tool rest and trying to maintain a straight course with the bowl gouge, and I'm just allowing the high spots that come around to be shaved off. It's a little tedious at first until we get down to a continuous cut. But it's important to do this well. If you push into the bowl blank when it's uneven and has high and low spots, then you're basically just riding those high and low spots. So the surface will never be smooth and you'll continuously be beaten up by that bowl blank. Instead, you want to create and cut a parallel line to the tool rest. Use the tool rest here as a guide. I have the bevel of the bowl gouge lined up and I'm making it parallel to the tool rest, and that allows me to get a nice straight cut. I'm down into the blank pretty thoroughly here. I'm making a nice even cut. If you hear the clicking and the skipping sounds, that means there's probably a low spot in there somewhere that you're dealing with still. But once you get down into the material where you're cutting it continuously, you know that you've got a nice smooth surface at that point. Now I'm going to use a scraping cut to determine where the top rim of this bowl will be. The top rim or the top edge of the bowl blank is not even, so by using the scraping cut I can get down to where there's an even surface that will become the top edge of the bowl. If you want to learn how to do the scraping cut, I've got a course called Bowl Gouge Mastery. And in that course, we go over in great detail all of the bowl gouge cuts and how to perform them. You're going to want to check that out. If you've been struggling with the bowl gouge, or if you're new to the bowl gouge, this course is specifically designed for you. And it's going to get you to the point where you can master the bowl gouge and basically do anything with it that you would like to do. So I'm working down from the top edge up to the apex. I'm starting to form the shape of this bowl, but I really need to get the base established first. You can see how the base is all wobbly. It hasn't been addressed yet. We have the top of the bowl defined, and once the bottom, the tenon, and the shoulder are defined, then I have point A and point B, and then we can start looking at the shape overall. So I'm going to go ahead and even out this bottom portion and get that shape now. Because we have this tight radius at the center of the bowl, it's a little tricky, But again, it's downforce into the tool rest and make a straight pass, and you'll knock off those high spots. Now the tailstock has been brought up for added support, but it is not holding this blank 100%. So I'll be able to pull the tailstock out of the way here in a second so that I have a nice smooth surface here. Whenever you have an opportunity to bring the tailstock up, you want to do that because you've got added support, and it just makes things safer, more secure, and it allows you to have much more accurate cuts. Now there was a little bit of soft material towards the outside of this blank, so I'm cutting down a little bit deeper so I get away from that soft material. I want this to be solid wood all the way through to the bottom of this bowl. And here I got the tailstock out of the way. I can take that little nub off. Really should turn the lathe off before moving the tool rest. I was being a little bit lazy there because this mass of this bowl blank is so heavy that I have to adjust my lathe. So it has about a 20-second stopping time. So it takes about 20 seconds to bring the lathe down from this speed because of the weight and mass of this bowl right now. So with the tenon marked, I can bring the tailstock back up. Now here the tailstock is actually really beneficial because it's doing a couple things. It's supporting the blank. It's supporting these 90-degree cuts that I'm making. These 90-degree cuts, the 90 degrees referring to 90 degrees against the headstock. So if you think about this, if the bowl wasn't turning and I'm pushing from the side right here, I'm basically pushing against that connection that the bowl has in the headstock. And that's creates a lot of force that can be a problem, especially becoming really aggressive with it. But with the tailstock in place, it helps to balance that out and takes a lot of that energy away from the headstock and supports the headstock as well. But the third thing, and the reason why you want to bring the tailstock up right here, is that the little pin in the tailstock quill is making a mark on the tenon of the bowl, and that's going to make it really easy for us to recenter this when we go to remove the tenon and the shoulder at the end of this bowl. Okay, so now that I have the bottom of the bowl established, we know where the bottom and the base of the bowl is going to be, and I know where the top rim is going to be. Now I can really start focusing on the shape of this bowl. So I'm going to work from the bottom up. So I've got a supported grain cut. And yep, I've got a video all about supported grain cut. If you're turning on the lathe and you seem to be getting a decent cut with the bowl gouge, but when you stop and you look at the surface that you've cut, there's a lot of tear out and it looks really rough. There's a good chance you're making unsupported cuts. So you're really going to want to check out that video after this one. So you learn all about how to perform supported grain cuts. It's super critical. It's a little tricky to understand at first, but once you get it, you get it. And it makes a big difference in the overall surface quality of your blanks or of your bowls. So I'm using a pull cut here to shape that bottom curve. There's kind of a point there. And the pull cut is nice because I can get down into that crevice right along the shoulder and then pull out and shave out. Now it's not a super smooth finish, but it allows me to get turned around. So now I'm doing a push cut from that location up towards the rim. Again, a supported grain cut. I've got shavings everywhere right now. You can't see this either, but there's water coming out of this bowl blank. Well, you can see the shine on the surface of the blank because it's so wet and it's releasing so much moisture in the ingrain. But that water is actually sprayed up onto the ceiling in my shop here. And it's accumulated enough that it's dripping back down onto the bowl blank. It's kind of crazy. I actually had to stop here for a moment and wipe down the ceiling. It's not the first time I've had green wood watermarks on the ceiling. So I'm using a shaving cut and a shear scrape. This is kind of halfway between a scrape and a shear scrape, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lower these high spots and blend the surfaces together. We do not have to make some fancy cut that goes all the way from the bottom of the bowl up to the rim all in one pass. You can work on sections. And the way you work on the sections is you get each section the way you want it, and then you can blend them together using the shear scrape. I've got a video all on that as well. If you go over to my channel and you search shear scrape, you're going to find my shear scrape video. You can see how I have the handle of the tool dropped and the lower bottom wing is engaging the wood only, and it is just lightly shaving away those high spots. Now here, I wanted to show you this point of view because I'm looking at the top of this bowl. I'm looking at the rim of this bowl. I'm not looking where my tool is so much. I want to see the top edge and I want to see that curve blend together. It's really important to back up and take a look at what you're doing so you can see the overall shape. And it's super important to be watching the top edge of your bowl as you create that shape. If you're staring at your tool all the time, you're probably not going to be able to create a really nice fluid shape very easily. Just take your time. Remember, the outside of the bowl is the bowl. The exterior of the bowl is the bowl. And what I mean by that is that it's everything. You're going to see the outside shape. You're going to touch it. Everybody looks at it. It's going to have all the appearance that everyone sees initially. You could even mess up the interior of the bowl pretty substantially. But if you've got the exterior looking really good, that's super important. Of course, we don't want to mess up the inside of the bowl. Okay, so you really want to support this blank again and turn the hand wheel to take that faceplate off. So I'm going to take the blank off the lathe and take the faceplate off. This is a bigger, heavier faceplate that works great for those pieces. I'll have a link for that in the description below this video. That and all the tools I use, typically I'll have a link that's in the description below the video. And if you'd like, you can go to my website, turnawoodbowl.com, and up at the top I have recommended equipment, and it's all categorized in different sections there. Okay, so I'm using the tailstock again to support this because I'm pushing hard. I want to remove material here, so I'm making a pretty aggressive cut. So if you can see, I'm pushing 90 degrees against the headstock. If that tailstock weren't there, that's a lot of pressure I'm putting on the headstock as it's turning, and we really don't want to be doing that. But with the tailstock in place, I can be a little bit more aggressive than I normally would. So sweet gum is actually just it's a really gorgeous tree. It has these 5-point, almost star-shaped leaves, but it has these seed pods that are really interesting. They're like little balls with spikes, and each one of the spikes is made up of 2 little pieces. It looks like a really small bird, like a baby bird opening its mouth asking its mom to feed it. And those are all kind of stacked together. And it's an interesting organic shape, the seed pods that come from a sweet gum tree. These are found in the southeastern part of the United States. They may be found in other areas, but they grow naturally here in the southeast. It is a softer wood, and it's not typically ideal for a lot of applications, but for doing something like this that has a really organic feel to it and will be relatively lightweight once it dries, this will be a really nice species to use for a calabash bowl. I'm making a really long nib here. Again, I'm not concerned with the support, the direct connection support from the tailstock, so I'm going to pull that out of the way, and I'll just get this nub off of here. Once I start coring out the interior of this bowl, I won't be able to bring the tailstock up. So I'm going to take my time now. I'm going to make a really clean cut using my 1/2-inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. And I'm going to round off this rim. I don't do this a lot. I usually like really straight, hard-edged rims, but I'm gonna like make this a little bit softer and round over this rim just a little bit. So I'm starting with the gouge at the 90-degree position so I don't get any kickbacks. And then I'm gonna work my way into the inside of the wall, and I'm going to establish the wall thickness. Got a lot of shavings flying right at the camera here. You can see the amount of moisture, and the small fibers that are coming off are just sticking to everything. Switching back and forth and using the left side of the bowl gouge and the right side of the bowl gouge, like you're seeing right now, now I'm using the left side, is actually advantageous because that left side hasn't been used, so it's very sharp still. So I can make nice, clean, quick cuts with that left side, and then when I return to the wall right here, I'm using the right side. So I'm utilizing more of that cutting edge. Regardless whether that side's used or not, when I go sharpen the tool, I need to sharpen it evenly so it's balanced. So even if I don't use that left side, I'm going to have to sharpen it and just turn that material away. So it's great to be able to use that side at different moments when I'm cutting so that I'm not just resharpening steel that was already sharp. Here I am on the left side of the bowl gouge. I wanted to show you this angle looking straight down because this is how you want to be standing when you're doing this cut. You want to be looking down on your turning subject. You don't want to be bent over looking into the bowl. You want to be looking down, and the main reason is you want to be able to line up the bevel of the bowl gouge and make it parallel to the exterior of the bowl. I don't know if you can see here, but if you look off to the left, you can actually see a spray of water coming out as I'm cutting the inside wall. And what's happening is that's the end grain fibers. So if you think about, if you've ever picked up water out of a cup or a glass with a straw by putting your finger over the end of the straw and lifting up and lifts the water out, well, the same concept happens with the moisture in the wood on the end grains. And what just happened is I'm cutting right behind the interior. I'm basically cutting those fibers and opening up those straws, if you will, of moisture, and it goes shooting out the end of the bowl. And that's what's giving me this spray of water everywhere. And it is literally everywhere. It's 360 degrees. It's hitting me, it's hitting the ceiling, it's hitting in front of me, it's hitting the floor. And this tree doesn't have too much tannin in it. I did that once with a really green black cherry blank, and it just stained everything. I've got marks everywhere from that because of the tannins that are in black cherry. So you just want to be aware of that. If you're turning really wet wood and you've got surfaces that you don't want to get dirty, then you might want to cover them. So I've reduced the core in the center of this blank. That's going to allow me to get down into the wall a little bit deeper. And the concept here is you work a section of the wall, get the wall thickness you want, get the surface you want inside the bowl, and then that's it. Don't go back up. Because as you work down, especially with a wet piece of wood like this, that wood is going to flex. So without that core or that mass in the center, that wall is going to flex a lot more, and you're not going to get a smooth cut. A lot of times, if I were to clear this whole bowl out so there's nothing in the interior, and I've got the walls as thin as they are now, they're about a 1/4 inch thick. If I had them thin like that, and this bowl were completely hollowed out and almost finished, and then I decided to go back up to that rim and cut the inside of that rim, I would most likely get a nasty catch, or worse, blow apart the top edge of the bowl because it's flexing and vibrating so much. As a matter of fact, I know it's a thing that a lot of people do is blow apart bowls. And if you think back to what happened and why that bowl blew apart, a lot of times it happens when somebody goes back up to a thin-walled rim that has no support and it's flexing and it's moving around. Now this bowl has a slightly closed rim, meaning that the rim is narrower than the widest part of the bowl. The widest part of this bowl is down in the lower section, lower third section of this. So when you have a closed rimmed bowl, the shavings inside will always get stuck inside. They can't get out. It's a centrifugal force thing. They just can't get out. Some of them will, but not all of them. You can see they're built up here around the edge. All right, I'm noticing my tools are not cutting as smoothly as they should be, so it's time to go sharpen. So I'm just going to jump over to the sharpening station and clean up these edges. I'm just smoothing out and restoring the shine on the bevel and the wings, the bevel wings, so that there's just a clean, smooth, shiny surface right up to the flute edge and the cutting edge, and that's all you need to do. Now, to learn how to sharpen your tools and how to shape your tools, if you've bought a new bowl gouge and you would like to shape it like the ones I'm using, then check out my online course called Tool Sharpening. In that course, I'm going to teach you how to sharpen, of course, all of your tools for wood bowl turning, and I'm going to show you how to shape the front of the tool, the bevel of the tool, any way you would like. I've got a variety of different styles that you can choose, not just the ones that I'm using here. So you want to check out that course, Tool Sharpening, at my website, turningwoodbowl.com. So I'm going to continue down. I've switched over to my J tool rest, which is an elongated tool rest that lets me get down into the bottom of a bigger bowl like this a little bit easier. And the only downside of this is I'm coming down to this kind of corner in the tool rest and I'm losing support. So I think I'm going to switch back over to my curved tool rest, not my straight tool rest, but my curved tool rest in here in just a second. You can see the bowl gouge nose is extended beyond the tool rest pretty far here. Now at this point in a deep bowl like this, I am looking in the side, but I'm not trying to bend over and look down inside there. And I'm stopping frequently to check the wall thickness. Now I can work this section, but I'm not going to go higher than this section because, like I said, I'll run into the danger of damaging that upper rim. And I'm making very light cuts here. You can see the flute is almost open, and the area that's cutting is almost right on the tip of the tool. It's not something that we do on a regular basis for regular cuts. This is a plunge wall thickness gauge. It's measuring, you see on the right side that the plunger will stick out just the exact thickness of the wall. So I'm looking at that little gap on the right side and making sure that's consistent throughout. As I'm working down this piece, right where I'm cutting there, that wall thickness should be very close to the top rim, and as I go down it should be thicker and thicker and thicker, and that's what you want. You don't want to get too aggressive with these cuts. You want to gradually sneak up on that wall thickness. So I'm just shaving off a little more material and a little more material so that this area now becomes the same thickness as the wall, but the area down here is still thicker. So I'm just gradually ramping and removing this ramp of material down the side wall of the inside of this bowl. Now I'm getting kicked around a little bit. This is my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. I've just switched over to my 3/4 inch bowl gouge. This is a Carter & Sons bowl gouge that I've got that I really like. It's very heavy and it's beefy for getting in here and doing this type of work of cutting into deeper material that's not well supported. I can't really get great support with the tool rest here. So you can see I'm extended over the tool rest, but because this is such a thick bowl gouge, it doesn't vibrate as much as my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. All right, so I'm going to use my 12 inch inside curved tool rest here. Now, I've got links for all of these tools in my description below this video. You might want to check that out. This is giving me the support that I need, and it's matching the curve that I have on inside this bowl. So again, I'm just gradually bringing this wall thickness down so that it matches the previous wall thickness. You can see there's an edge that's formed. Just want to make a very light cut there and blend those edges together. I'm rubbing the heel and then the bevel, and then I'm engaging the cut. So I'm rubbing and picking up that cut. Just want to take your time there. You don't want to make a deeper cut than necessary. And you want to stop frequently and check that wall thickness. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to my micro bevel. I know I told you guys at the beginning of this video that you can turn bowls with pretty much 1 or 2 bowl gouges, but I'm actually using 4 in this one because this is pretty much a much larger bowl, and with the curved rim that this has, or the closed rim, the angle of which I need to get down into the bottom of this bowl is a little bit trickier to get to. So that's a perfect application for my micro bevel. Now I am switching back to my 5/8 inch bowl gouge here just to nibble away this material in the center bottom of this. Now these push cuts going right into the headstock are actually the best cut that you can use because they're not pushing against the headstock, they're pushing into the headstock, which is actually pretty well supported at this point. So it's not going to jostle the bowl in the tenon chuck connection. Okay, so I'm going to return to the micro bevel bowl gouge. Now, yep, you might have guessed, I have a video all about the micro bevel bowl gouge. You're going to want to check that out because it is a great tool to have in your arsenal. And the tool sharpening course that I mentioned earlier, we go into great detail how to shape a bowl gouge to become a micro bevel as well. So you can make your own micro bevel bowl gouge very easily. But the reason that we use this, it has about a 65-degree bevel on the nose, which means that the angle of which you present this tool is almost straight into the bowl. It's not quite straight in, but it's feels like it's straight into the bowl. And you can avoid the rims, so it makes it easy to get down into a deep bowl like this one very easily and turn that bottom last portion to get a nice concave interior to the bottom of the bowl. So I'm stopping here and I'm checking that wall thickness. You can see the plunger on the right side or left side there in my right hand. That wall thickness right there is what I'm trying to match all the way around. And it's looking good. The bottom of this bowl still has some thickness to it, which is what I was expecting at this point. And I need to finish up this curve at the bottom of the bowl. Again, it's a very light cut. We're just trying to remove a little bit of material to make the curve of the interior bottom of this bowl continuous to flow with the exterior curve that was established initially. All right, that's looking really, really good. Now this wood is way too wet to be finished sanding, but I'm using a coarse sandpaper here, 80 grit, to remove any tool marks because I don't want those to remain. I'm also using it to curve and finish shape the, you can actually see the vibration there, the flexing in the rim, trying to sand that rim. So the sanding is just designed to take away any of the tool marks. So I'm going to take this off the lathe and I'm going to put a jam chuck on the lathe. And then I'll actually going to spray mount this piece of foam here because it's a little tricky reaching in there. And if the foam is not centered well on the jam chuck, it can easily make the interior of the bowl wobble. So we want this to turn smoothly. I can bring the tailstock up and put it right on that previous little mark that was created when we first turned the tenon and shoulder. And it lines up almost perfectly. So now I can start removing the shoulder and the tenon just by doing a scraping push cut in towards the headstock. As I'm removing the bulk of this material, I'm also paying attention to that continuous curve. So I want the bottom of this bowl to curve right up to the sidewalls, so it's one fluid curve. Remember, there's going to be no foot on this bowl. So I need this to be nice and fluid. I'm going to use a shear scrape here to blend those cuts and the sidewall with the bottom of this bowl. Just take your time and shape this out. You can actually see that the bowl, because of its wetness, was flexing there a little bit. You can see it there on the edges. This is no longer round. In the time that I turn this, it's no longer round, which brings up another good point. If you turn wood that's this wet, you want to do this all very quickly within a matter of a couple hours. You definitely don't want to start a project like this and then try to return to it on the lathe at a later time, because the piece will be either really wobbly or it will actually have broken itself apart. We really need to get down to an even wall thickness as quickly as possible to prevent the bowl from breaking or cracking. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I've got a little nub there that I need to get off. You want to take your time here. You might want to take the lathe speed down. If you're not comfortable doing this, you can easily cut that nub off and then sand it smooth. I'm going to switch over to my spindle detail gouge. And I'm going to cut this nub down. Now, I've got to remember this wood's relatively soft. I don't want to stop the lathe right now because just the torque of it stopping and starting again will probably break this nub off. So I'm going to make the cut, apply pressure, and turn the lathe off. And that'll cut that little nub right off. There we have a nice flowing curved calabash bowl with no natural foot. Check out all these shavings. I wanted to show you this. This is what the screen behind me does. It catches all those shavings. Some got past the screen there, but it catches all those shavings and just drops them to the floor. That's why I have those screens behind me. I have one off to my right as well that catches the shavings when I'm turning the interior of the bowl. Most of what's on the floor behind me is the exterior of the bowl. Okay, I'm going to apply a coat of Danish oil, and you might be thinking, why would you be putting a finish on this bowl? It's soaking wet. Well, this finish is not designed to be the finish. This finish is designed to seal the end grains so that the moisture that's in this bowl doesn't escape rapidly through the end grain fibers. This is not intended to have anything to do with the final look of this bowl. I'm actually using Danish oil as a sealer here. And it's going to slow the drying so this doesn't crack as easily. Well, here it is, a finished, really organic looking calabash bowl with no foot. Just this beautiful curved shape that's reminiscent of a gourd or a squash, and that was our overall goal. I'm really happy with the way this looks and the way it turned out.
So there's the calabash bowl. Isn't this gorgeous? Can you imagine this coming from a large gourd? Maybe this is the bottom of the gourd and the neck tapers up and it's like a bottleneck, and a smaller section up here. This could be cut from the base. It's very believable, and there are gourds that get this large. So this is somewhat reminiscent of an actual calabash bowl that has been used through almost all cultures for thousands of years. So it's very cool. And there's no base on this. It's relatively flat, but it's still concave and follows the curve of the bowl, but it's allowed to basically sit flat. And these are typically sat on the ground. They can sit on a table. It doesn't have much wobble in it, but it doesn't sit perfectly flat like most of the other bowls that we turn. But this is a gorgeous example of a calabash bowl. Now, where do we go from here? Well, this wood was turned very even. This is about 1/4 of an inch thick all the way across, all the way through the bottom. And that's very important to have an even wall thickness so that this doesn't crack when it dries. If we have different wall thicknesses, there's going to be really high potential for the wood to crack as it dries. I'm going to take this and I'm going to stick it in a paper bag with the wet shavings from today, and I'm going to watch it over the next few days. The wet shavings are going to protect this and allow it to gradually dry so it doesn't go very quickly into a dry state. Now, I put the oil on here to seal the end grain sections. That had nothing to do with the finished look of this piece. It's simply to help seal some of these these pores so that the moisture doesn't escape quicker from the end grain versus the side grain. That's going to help also with the even drying process. So we're going to let this dry, and then I'm going to completely hand sand it. So all the oil that was put on today is going to simply be sanded away. It's going to have a nice sanded finish, and then I will apply the finish oil to the bowl. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you think of this bowl, and let me know if you're going to turn a calabash bowl. And if you've liked this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button. Yeah, I greatly appreciate that. And subscribe if you're not already subscribing. Also, check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got tons of great information for you. Plus, I've got courses that are going to quickly build your wood bowl turning skills. So check it out. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, until next time, happy turning. So I'm going to get this beautiful, great big